All right. Welcome to episode 22 of the Liberty Mastermind podcast. I'm Ox, along with my buddies Pat and Jack. And tonight, our special guest is Jake Fuller. We'll be discussing things from special operations to homesteading. Our special guest tonight is Jake Fuller, who at a very young age wanted to become a warfighter. Immediately after high school, he went into the Navy and then went through the very long, very arduous SEAL pipeline. In the teams, he was a SEAL sniper and recon team as a point man. After leaving the Navy, he started a family, has done various work with fellow combat veterans, and his current work has him working on his homestead in Texas and launching a construction firm. All right, Pat, any news? Any new developments? Anything interesting?
Yes, I think we're at episode 4 for my personal podcast for my website, Uncensored Tactical Podcast.
Mhm.
I got a buddy of mine who I also met in the Liberty Movement, who's a civilian, who's pretty security-minded. So the two of us are cutting a lot of tape over there. What about you?
Briefly, interestingly, my new boss, we call him a attending physician, he and I have been talking about starting a podcast on just the psychology of success. He was a former neurosurgeon turned psychiatrist. I'm a former neuroscience researcher turned psychiatry PA, and we've been talking about doing a podcast just focused on psychology of success. So we're looking to this coming year, and I'm stoked. So I know you're eager to roll, so let's get rolling.
Okay.
Jake, welcome to the show, man. It's been forever, it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Well,
Jake.
I'm super stoked, but I do have one housekeeping question that I didn't tell you about. What was it like being in the SEAL teams, starting out and looking like you were about 15 years old with no cool man beard? Did you get a lot of flack for that?
That's a great question, man. You know, it's when I do some public speaking events, they'll normally introduce me and I walk up and not only can I not grow a completely awesome man beard, but I'm also like 5'10", 170 soaking wet. And every time I go up and do these public speaking events, man, I walk up there, they introduce me, I walk up to the podium, and it never fails. Like I can see somebody like looking behind me every time, like, okay, but wait, we already introduced somebody, like there's already somebody to introduce him. There doesn't need to be somebody else to introduce the SEAL. Where's he at? Like they're always waiting for me for this big monster guy to walk out. So that's a good one, man. And you know, in all honesty, one day when I stand before the Lord, that will be my first question as well. Of, man, you allowed me to go through, you know, what some would call the hardest military training in the world, and you're not going to allow me to grow a beard. What gives, man? Like, what was the lesson?
I guess there's something good to be. It's good to be an adult and get carded still. So
yeah, for sure.
You know, people would kill for that. Well, maybe we'll get into some, Pat might want to talk about that sort of thing. I am super stoked to have you on because, briefly, background, over the past couple of weeks or so, I've taken my walk in the evening, and it's kind of my meditation time, my prayer time. And I'm thinking to myself, what are some topics, what's an area that we can cover that's going to beef up some of the audience, like the self-sufficiency, self-reliance? What's an area that we can cover to really, help people out more? And I thought of the homestead. That's where we're going to be able to maybe save money on our bills and maybe grow food that's better quality than we can find in the grocery store and so on. And so the homestead came to mind. So I've been eager to kind of cover that in different episodes. And I know you are kind of early into homesteading, so I'm super stoked to talk about that, hear what you have going on in Texas. And so how did you get into it?
Well, it's interesting because homesteading was something that we've kind of, we're in the beginning stages of that, but it's something that we've kind of fallen into as a result of being very, what we call intentional. My wife and I, we use that word a lot, and that's something that we feel very passionate about, is being intentional in life. And homesteading for me personally is a much deeper rooted passion and venture than just, honestly, like, yes, it's great to have better quality food, whether it's even from a taste perspective, from a, nutrients to the body perspective. Scientifically, like, I'm loving digging in and learning all about that. But for me, it's really rooted more in where I come from, and my time in the teams and what that did to me psychologically and internally, that has really caused this kind of epidemic in my family. And my wife is a big contributor to that. She's kind of a Texas hippie. I call her that all the time, but she laughs too, but she is a little bit, she has a degree in kinesiology. So, I mean, health and nutrition is at the forefront of her mind. But we're both also believers. We, from a faith perspective, we believe that God created things a certain way, and that, man can glorify God and not glorify God in the way that man approaches those things. But for me, personally, when you look at the SEAL teams and you look at the core kind of principle of this hard program that guys made it through, and a lot of people boil it down to this one word called grit, right? That's a super powerful thing. I mean, that's something that we've had tons of psychiatrists for many years, decades now, study the SEAL teams and go, what makes somebody make it? And I think the result of that is they've literally come back and said, we don't know, because it really, it kind of, from this outside looking in perspective, there's really nothing that you can kind of put your finger on, so to speak. But from an inside looking out perspective, it's just a desire, right? Like, you have a desire and you want to go achieve something. And it really does boil down to that grit. Now, who has that and who doesn't, that's a hard discussion to get into. But what I will say is that some of the things that I learned in the SEAL teams, they stuck with me when I got out. And one of those things was, I just love working hard. And when I got out, I worked very hard in my job, and I got out, started working full time and going to school full time, upon having, also having kids. And when I start slowing down, and I tell my wife this all the time, she knows this, like, idle hands for me are not good. I hate it. And I just love working hard. Well, as we started to have kids, and as I started to get more and more into, my career and progress, we started to hear a lot about this word millennial. And I honestly, I hate it. It is something that when somebody says, oh yeah, you're a millennial, it, like, to my bones, it like makes me just irritated, because that right now, that doesn't have a very good, it doesn't have a very good name for it. You know what I mean? People,
Right.
they hear the word millennial and they're like, oh, a Googleite that doesn't work hard and is entitled.
Right.
So for us, when we started having kids, we started thinking, how are we going to bring our kids up in a society that honestly promotes for children to be entitled, whether it's everybody gets the trophy. We all, we've heard a lot of the examples, but how do we actively fight against that? And when you think about the word liberty, and what you guys are standing for, even in this podcast, I think those things go hand in hand, is that if you want liberty, that's something that you're going to have to fight for,
Exactly.
And that's something that you're going to have to be very intentional about. Hey, the founding fathers were very intentional, and freedom is not free, at a great cost, and it still does every day. So that's a long way of saying that we want to be very intentional in the way that we raise our kids, and to fight against this, this aura of an American culture that is becoming entitled and doesn't work hard and complainers and whiners. And, you know, the way that we decided to combat that was by moving out to the country and going back to the roots of, let's go back to the very fundamental basics of how we were created, how God has called us to live, and to just put our hands to the plow and work hard. So that's what we're doing.
So many things. It's very exciting. One thing, tell us about your current setup. So you moved sort of out of the city. Mm-hmm. What does that current setup look like?
Well, we sold a house in a neighborhood, and we're in the DFW area, so it's hard, right? We're not in rural America, so to speak. We're right in the suburbs, and we started with 4 chickens in our backyard, actually 6. And I mean, literally, we'd have like neighbors coming over and like looking over the fence because, you know, they're hearing chickens cluck, and it was a pretty funny experience. Overall, everybody had a pretty good attitude about it. We didn't really have tons of people complaining or anything, but it allowed us to know that, wow, I didn't even know I really had a passion for this. I think my wife, followed a couple people on Instagram and just got excited about it. And so pretty quickly we realized, like, if we really want to take this to the next level and, get into aquaponics or, different types of homesteading, then we're going to need more space. That's the first thing. So sold that house, about 4 acres, about 45 minutes away. So we're really trying to do it right. My dad owns 100 acres out in East Texas. So kind of our thought process is, hey, if we can kind of figure it out on the 4-acre scale, and rule in the way that we use those 4 acres and grow slowly, methodically, then eventually there's an opportunity to go to 100 acres and use that. So it's kind of a cool situation. Really small, and now we're growing bigger and bigger.
We kind of lost you just a smidge there. Everybody still on?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Hey, Jake,
going back to
I'm sorry, can you give us the the layout? Like, what do you got going on? What type of, you just have like a regular family home and some land out there, or animals, chickens,
yes,
all that?
So we bought a 1,900 square foot ranch house, basically, that right now kind of is some of the interior. It's a 25-year-old house. That we have 3 egg already, which was awesome. And we're close to Texas grasslands, so not many trees. So we've got a lot of flat space that allows us to use it however we want to. Of farming, but outside of that, we have 1 acre that our house sits on that we've kind of let the 2 kids and the dog take over for a little while.
Yeah, Jake, I heard most of it, but we're having some audio problems. We keep cutting out. I think maybe all 3 of us on my end.
Oh,
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, fellas. I don't know if it's me or.
I don't really love using the Google Hangout thing either, but well, might as well push through. Next question you got here, Cox. We'll just wing it. If it stays like this, we'll just cut the episode and we'll try again sometime.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a little bit of the layout. Future plans for the homestead. Where do you want to take it?
The thing that I realize more and more is that the more I'm in an office and then go out to my land, the more I realize I really want to be on the land. There's something in the way that we were created that I just love being outdoors. Ironically enough, I've got pretty bad allergies, and when I'm inside all the time, they're actually magnified. But when I go outside In sniper school, when I was in the teams, we're shoving weeds all over our ghillie suits and hats, and I don't sneeze once. And I come to the FW and I get in an office, and all I do is sit here all day and rub my eyes and sneeze. So, you know, I really feel like part of our system, part of our internal, makeup is we're meant to be outside. We're meant to be exposed to that stuff. So, man, for me, the long-term goal would be to, really take a business approach to it. We want to start small. We want to watch our expenses. And I really believe in understanding what I'm doing. So our first thing that we've really started understanding is chickens. So following guys, like Salatin or Justin Rhodes or Siskovich. Those guys, they've really helped me learn a lot. So this next season, we'll do about 100 broilers using chicken tractors. And our goal is to kind of have a 2-phase spring, if you will. We're going to do a small garden, but we're really going to work on the orchard because it's first year. We want to plant as many trees as possible this year so that we can enjoy them throughout our time on the property. But so this year is really dedicated in the spring to broilers and, the orchard. So that's kind of where we're at.
I've got about 6 or so Cornish cross that I'm still kind of growing out.
Nice.
Here now. One thing you mentioned earlier about millennials not wanting to, there's sort of this connotation or idea that they don't work hard or whatnot. And the flip side of that being on the homestead, it does take a lot of work. And lately, just to kind of get a beat on how much time I put into my homestead, I've kind of been keeping tabs on that because work is, sometimes 12-hour days seeing patients, and I get home and I'm timing that. How long does it take me to feed the ducks and the chickens and the quail and stuff? I'm putting about an hour into my homestead each evening. So what kind of time investment do you all have at this point per day or per week? Or
that's an interesting question because honestly, I don't track it probably as good as I should. When we bought the property, we're right in the middle of some longer term changes. So, tarping off some pasture so that eventually, we can use that for gardening and stuff. So we're getting everything ready right now. The real answer to your question is I don't track it. And the reason why is because right now we don't have a TV in our home. We have dedicated the time before bed to reading, and we're very intentional with our time. So when I come home, it's not a matter of, I got to go out and do this. It's a matter of it's like my therapy, man. I mean, like I go outside and if I'm not feeding the chickens or re-engineering, something, then I'm sitting on the back porch smoking a tobacco pipe because I just love it. So, it may take me an hour and a half to go feed the chickens when I would just sit there and watch them. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily a chore. It's a lifestyle for me. So as we progress and as we get bigger and bigger with Fuller Farms, obviously time is going to become more of the essence as, more of our income becomes a part of the homestead. But we're excited at the opportunity of just being able to go do that. So right now for us, we're still kind of in that honeymoon stage, I guess you could say.
Well, I'm with you on the therapeutic, being out, feeding the chickens, feeding the ducks, just being out, breathing in deeply, feeling the air. It's therapeutic. So I imagine, that honeymoon phase will continue a long time. It's funny. You mentioned having the allergies thing. I was having that thought actually today on my walk because I'm out every day for about an hour and a half. And I thought, man, when I was growing up, I didn't have allergy shots or, any of that sort of thing. And I was out playing in the neighborhood for 2 or 3 hours in the evenings. And I don't remember taking, Zyrtec or allergy shots or anything like that. And I see patients every day, that little kiddos that are just miserable with allergies. Anyway, let's see. So Fuller Farms. Can you, who all is going to be involved in that?
Right now, right now it's a family venture. So we're, the springtime for us, we're winding down now in December, but as we get into the spring, it'll be an all hands on deck. I mean, my wife is making an apron for my daughter for collecting eggs. I mean, we're being very intentional that this is a full family venture. So for us, we're just about to butcher our first initial four chickens, and we're walking through the cycle of life with our kids and everything. And that's what's great about this experience, is that there's so many lessons to be learned from understanding where your food comes from, taking care of animals, everything from compassion to forgiveness. I mean, my dad got stomped by a horse the other day, and it's just one of those things where there's a lot of life lessons as a kid when you see things like that happen, and you learn how to cope with some troubling times or some tribulations, and you learn how to push through. You learn how to forgive animals or people. You learn how to work hard. So if you ask my son, what are we? It's kind of a little family saying that we have. If you say, what are we? He would tell you hard workers, because that's
cool. I like that.
That's just our motto, is that we just want to be hard workers. And for us, it's just become more of a joy. At some point it's not work anymore, right? At some point it's just who you are, and you just love it. So kind of where we're at.
So it's sort of bringing family closer together, or developing, culturing that. How has it impacted your sense of community? I ask because, I'm thinking I take the surplus eggs that I have, and I'll give them to the mailman or whatever, or some of my buddies. And I did that last week. I talked with the mail guy, and I gave him a dozen extra eggs that I had. And next thing I know, I looked in my mailbox a few days later, and there was like an extra pound of coffee from him. And I thought, it's just so cool. Like it brings, homesteading to me, another benefit is it brings communities together. It brings people together. What's that look like for you?
That's a great perspective, because I think one of the things that, is really interesting about homesteading is, at its core, it's like the most fundamental practice that we can do as humans, right? You're born and you're on the earth, and you have to provide food for, God has provided food for us, but you have to harvest the ground, and, on and on and on, right? You have to live. Well, part of living is surviving and foraging and all that. So, it's in our nature, and it affects every single country, community, language. Everybody to the core understands the basic principles of what this is, right? You raise animals and you eat them, or they provide for you in some form or fashion, and you put your hands to the plow, and if there's good rain, you get some produce from that. So people understand it, but what it does is it allows you to go out into the community. And we have met a lot of different people. Some of our best friends now, actually we're going over their house tonight to hang out with them. But they were from Colorado, and they were on a homesteading farm as a labor force, living on the ranch. Everything from ducks to chickens to cows to goats to the whole nine yards, and they were there for, I believe, 2 years. And now we get together and we talk about this stuff, but to be honest with you, they're very different than us. If you look at our normal bubble, they're very different people. They don't they very rarely eat meat. I'm like a meatitarian, so it's really cool, because their perspective on life and their viewpoints and everything are we would never just naturally come together and go, hey, let's all go break bread together. But this thing, called homesteading or farming, or whatever word you want to use, has brought us together, because Daniel and I immediately connect. And he's like, oh, Salatin, oh yeah, and, oh, chicken tractors, just immediately brings us together, and then we start tonight. We're going over there, and I can't even tell you what we're eating because I've never had any of it, and they throw out words that I've never heard of. So I go over there and learn more about different types of beans and peas and stuff that from all over the world, because they have a huge variety in their diet because they don't eat as much meat as we do. So, man, whether it's that or the local rancher down the road that has pasture raised grass fed beef and has done it one way his whole life. I mean, it's really cool because I feel like when you talk about food, it translates into any language, and
Right.
and people are passionate about it. They care about it, and it really can break down a lot of barriers. It's pretty cool.
It's funny it makes me think of a concept that Pat and I learned from one of our acquaintances and friends, and it's a concept of function stacking, where you being a meatitarian, maybe you specialize in chickens, like Cornish cross and maybe some heritage breeds. Maybe you get into quail and ducks and whatever. But your friend Daniel, was that his name?
Yeah.
Maybe he focuses on beans and vegetables and stuff like that. And so your surplus, the ducks, chickens, quail, whatever, you can take that and swap with him. You're the meat guy and he's the bean guy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's what's kind of cool to me about kind of getting into homesteading. You have your little area of specialty and you can take the surplus and swap with friends. That's what the fun thing is for me.
Yeah. For us, we're excited. We're planning on this next year boar goat, which is, I don't know how much you guys follow the goat in the goat meat industry, but
no.
Goat meat is blowing up. I mean, obviously, it's the largest consumed meat in the world, or most consumed meat in the world. And as more, what we would call foreigners, but more people come from all over parts of the world, they're used to eating goat. Well, in America, that's not very common, but it's significantly on the rise. And it's an awesome opportunity because you can have far more goats on 1 acre of land than you could cattle. They're a little easier on the property, so to speak. But we're excited because, as we, get into the goat side of our farm, we don't really want to get into pork because obviously, hogs destroy the property, they destroy the ground, and I don't have hundreds upon hundreds of acres for them to kind of be sectioned off in their own little corner. But we want to make sure that we're taking care of the ground the best we can. But the good news is that I can raise more goat and exchange that for pork with our local butcher. So that's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. I lived in Mexico for a while, and cabrito, like goat, was one of the items there. If you ever do Fuller goat's milk, I might buy all of it. Like I have this unhealthy appreciation for goat's milk.
That's awesome.
One thing I kind of touched on earlier. So we talked about the quality, homesteading, like, what the chickens ate, like you fed them, they were in a nice environment. So there's this quality component, but it's also, at least for me, I can produce a dozen eggs, better quality, but less than at the grocery store. So are you all noticing any decrease in your financial liabilities, like your grocery bill or anything like that?
Yes, we're really, next year, our goal, I'm launching a company, a construction company as well. So it may take a little bit more of my time. We may not meet our goal, but our goal is to be able to go a whole year without buying any produce, of, growing the majority of it, whether it's canning or drying or, whatever it is, and trading our surplus for other stuff that we would like to have. That's our goal. And obviously that makes a huge savings on the
Right.
bank account. I think overall starting off is expensive. I also probably take it a little further than what I have to. Part of what I love and enjoy is, building a chicken coop that it's the ingenuity side of me where I look at it and I go, how can I make this coop to where I don't have to go in there,
Right.
to where I
Right.
can move it, whether it's mobile and, whether the floor is made out of, chicken wire. So I literally don't ever have to clean it, or I can just open it and, spray it out. Siskovich has a pretty sweet like tractor chicken coop, which I'm pretty jealous of. He's got this awesome tractor, floorless chicken coop. And so I love the ingenuity part of it. And honestly, there's a little bit of waste there for me that I have to really watch it, because every 3 months I want to redesign something. So for me, it's understanding, it's really taking the business approach. And I think that's the real catalyst that we're at right now, is taking it from a hobby to turning it into a business.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, a lot of ways that you approach homesteading changes, so for me this year, I'm watching the ones and zeros a lot more, and really being very intentional about doing a lot more research into, whether it's building a barn, chicken coop, fencing, all that type of thing, that we're being very intentional on where we place, orchard, where we place, our gardens, how we're going to use the land, because we really want to eliminate waste. So that's becoming more and more and more of a focus for me, is really seeing 5 years down the road, and where is everything going to be and where is it going to go, so that we can have it in the right place the first time, versus, it costs money and time to move things and to redo things. So we're trying to get away from that and focus more on, more produce, more production with less waste. So it's good.
Well, waste, and one thing that to me lately has kind of come up in my own homesteading picture is not so much waste, but investment is that time element. And, you mentioned kind of looking at the coop and maybe redesigning and whatnot. Automation is one way to kind of minimize some of that waste. So, instead of me having to go out and spend 10 minutes a day feeding and watering the birds, maybe there's a way I can automate it where it only requires me to do that once a week. So I save, 45 minutes. And that's, wow, 45 minutes, and you've got, I don't, but when you got little ones and a bride and, multiple businesses, that's super valuable, that 45 minutes. So
yeah, that's actually been a large part of, I would say, this kind of second phase of homesteading. So the going from hobby to business has really become the automation.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, just, it's a simple thing, but in the chicken coop, we're doing automated doors. But when you can get into automated doors, which is great, because that, obviously lets your layers in and out during the day so that they can free range. That's a great aspect. But then you have the problem, well, what about at night, when, I still have to go out at night and close the nesting boxes, to keep those clean. Well, this next chicken coop development or design has automated doors for when the doors open on to let the layers out, for it's morning time, here you go. The doors at the same time open up the nesting boxes, and in a reverse order. So at night, when the door closes, the nesting box is closed. So it's taking two things that normally I'd have to go do and turn it into, one automated thing. Right. So, gravity fed, obviously doing bulk gravity feed. So you're, not spending too much time going out and feeding every day or anything like that. And obviously there's, you can use automated, water fillers and stuff. So there's a lot of ways to save time. Part of that time I want it to stay there. And what I mean by that is there is a burden associated with life, right? Like we have to get up and do things. And I think the more that we learn to just get up and do them and have a positive attitude in the way that we do them, the better off that we are. So some of the little things we leave in place intentionally because I have a big sigh every time he has to go do it. And I can remind him that, we have this gift of life and not to take it for granted and to be grateful for the things that you have and to work hard. So it's fun. It's a happy balance. We want a lot of automation to free us up, but we also want to be able to have the joy associated with working hard. So.
And you said it earlier. I mean, homesteading. To me, it's not working, and it sounds like it's not really working to you because it's so enjoyable. And just to define that term, me and other people, Pat, we use that term homestead, and to me, that means you take a home, and it becomes a homestead when it like produces something, whether that's eggs or plants or whatever. It actually generates something. So that's sort of how I define homestead. Do you have any words or thoughts for people who are maybe on the fence about trying to start somewhere or grow something or raise something? Do you have any thoughts for those people?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to start small. I think the most common, I love, learning about homesteading. I mean, I spend a lot of my time that I would spend watching TV or having a show. I spend a lot of time podcasting or watching YouTube videos on guys that have, mastered it or are really, they're at the point in their life where they're all in and have stepped away from corporate America and are able to dedicate a lot of time to it. But, I would just say starting small is a big deal because when you take a tomato plant and you don't just go buy a tomato plant, right? Like you look at, okay, where am I going to put the tomato plant? Well, I'm going to put it in this part of my backyard. Okay, what's the sun pattern of that part of your backyard? What's your soil conditions? Are you going to do above ground or below ground? Or, what's your temperatures? What area of, what climate are you in? And what's your rainfall? Are you going to water? I mean, it can really be overwhelming if you allow it to be. So, I think I learned a lot the first time that I planted a garden because I plowed the ground or tilled the ground and then planted everything and everything died. I mean, it was just like, I think the only thing that made it was, the tomato plants for a little bit and my jalapenos because they're basically, they can make it through anything. But, whenever you're starting off, just go slow, start with one plant. And when you start to understand that plant a little bit more and you start to understand what makes it grow, what makes it wilt, what turns it yellow, what turns it green, and being very intentional about learning the things that are incorporated with that plant. Once you get one plant, then you can go to several more plants, and it's really fun to watch that. It's fun to watch that process because once you've kind of taken the time to learn the process of how things grow, then it's amazing how fast you can exponentially grow after that, right? But I'll never forget, I watched a YouTube video and it was just a really great, a really great opportunity for me to kind of humble myself because the first thing he said was, I forget, his name escapes me right now, but the first thing he said was know your weeds. And I was just thinking about it. I'm like, man, I live in a suburb I have a little backyard and I don't even know my weeds, and it just humbles you. And it's like, I went to Home Depot and bought plants and thought that I was like going to become Joe Farmer overnight, like it gives you a lot of respect for these people when you see homesteads that they're doing, 2,000 pounds of produce out of backyard. And you're just like, golly, like, well done. You know what I mean? Like it gives you respect for those people and it makes you appreciate the food that you're eating. It also allows you to understand a little bit differently you look at GMOs and you start researching that a little bit more, and you start going, well, what is this GMO thing? And you start learning about all these different, pesticides and things, and you start going, oh, I don't want any pesticides. And then you're like, well, crap, the beetles are eating every tomato. Like, what do you do? So it's really fun when you start to understand this little tiny tomato plant. You start to see a bigger picture of like, wow, like I'm understanding global commerce better because I'm really taking the time to understand this little tomato, and these huge, lobbyists that are fighting for commercial farms, and they're fighting for, all these different words, marketing words, and free range, and, different things like that. It really makes you understand on a greater scale, what do I really believe in this? Because I think it's easy for us to read a magazine or, see an article, and we immediately develop an opinion. The hard part is in that opinion, we're so uneducated. People ask me all the time, they're like, well, what do you think about Donald Trump? Or, what do you think about, what's going on in, wherever in the world, Syria, or, and what do you think about Trump's decision for this? Or what do you think about Obama's decision for that? And constantly my response to them is, I don't know, because I don't have any of the information. Because
Right.
I think for me, one of the things was when I was in the SEAL, one of the things is when I was in the SEAL teams, I had a top secret clearance, and they didn't tell me jack, like very little, only like, pull you into a little room and go, okay, on this op, you just need to know this. But it's not, I was fully expecting like, hey, here's the file on JFK, dig in, man. That day never came, And so it's been exciting for me to have my eyes opened and be humbled by the fact that I don't know everything, and that's okay. And I know so little of the information. Donald Trump's every day, the reports that he gets is the most latest up-to-date news, and we may never hear about it in 100 years. But he's making the best educated decision that he can for the country from his perspective, with all of the best information at his fingertips. And yet we're going to sit home and watch Fox News or CNN and go, well, that's the wrong decision. Like it puts it into perspective of, you have to understand where you're at, and you have to understand that it all starts with this little tomato plant, in my opinion, and understanding your role, your responsibilities, and being intentional with where you are in life. I don't know. It's my perspective.
Well, yeah, and kind of on the Trump note, I mean, we can't affect his decisions, but what we can affect is that little tomato plant. Pat, what's that expression that we always hear from our buddy Jack? It doesn't affect the temperature in my pool. Yeah, like, what President Trump is doing, that doesn't affect the temperature in the water, of the water in my pool, or whatever the expression is. Like, but I can, go feed my chickens, or, plant a tomato plant or whatever. Like, that's what I do have influence over. That's what I do have control over.
Dude,
so maybe
there's a lot to be said for that. People that, are living on welfare, and they're complaining about legislation without, when they should be writing a resume. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of things there, and I'm not trying to speak into any one thing there. I mean, don't read too much into that, but it's a general principle of being a hard worker, right? Like, and understanding that we all have responsibilities in life, and that nothing is free. Nothing. If you wake up and have breath, it wasn't free, So if you start with that mindset, then it gives you a whole nother level of gratefulness. And when you're grateful for something, then it totally changes your perspective versus being entitled for something. When you're entitled for something, nothing is ever going to be good enough, ever. But whenever you're grateful for something, everything is. I mean, just the smallest little sun ray is beautiful because you've been begging for sun for that little tomato plant. You know what I mean? Like you've been praying for that little bit of sun to help bring to life your little tomato plant because you're focused on your tomato plant, understanding that tomato plant is going to have a much greater impact. So yeah, I'm with you.
It's magical.
Yeah, it really is. Sorry, I'm not trying to get all, magical and, I love it, man.
Well, it is. I mean, to me, it is kind of magical. Like if I take this bird chow and I give it to my chickens, they give me eggs. I mean, to me, that's magic. I feel like Harry Potter, or, like a wizard. Every time I do it, I go out there and there are 3 duck eggs and there are like 8 chicken eggs. Every day I go out there. To me, that's like, holy shit, that's magic.
Yeah, anyway. No, for sure.
I gotta tell you, like the biggest tool that I have in both my careers and in my life is I'm really thankful for spending 10 years overseas and bringing back perspective, which is one heck of a tool. So yes. You're right. I mean, every freaking shower I take when I get hot water, I'm like, man, that is really nice. And other people don't get to experience that way unless they've suffered without it for a while.
Yeah, for sure. I lived in a underground goat locker. We were in Southeast Afghanistan and we were getting mortared like almost every day, sleeping in tents. And me and this other guy found this little goat locker nearby in our little compound. And I mean, literally it had like 18 inches of goat crap in this thing. It was disgusting. We spent, I don't know, 4 or 5 days and dug it out and you couldn't even stand up in it. But every time we got mortared, like the building would shake, but we were just like, oh, thank you. And you think about that and you're like, most people wouldn't even walk in there. We slept in there. I'm probably going to die of cancer when I'm like 40. But it's just one of those things where it totally does change your perspective when you come back. I'll never forget this. I came back and then, within a few days, I'm sitting there eating and a little bit of food. I was like macaroni and cheese. I don't know what it was, but a little bit of food fell off my plate onto the table, like not even on the ground, like on the table. And I just picked it up and I ate it off the table. And my wife was like, gross, you don't have to do that anymore. I was like, gross? Like, what are you talking about? Like, this table's, I mean, like, you clean it 5 times a day with, I mean, it's just, this thing has more thieves oil on it than a thieves plant. And it's clean, I promise, And it's just funny because we have no clue. Go back 1,000 years, and that's really what it's like when you go to the Middle East, right? It feels like you go back 1,000 years. But people in America have no clue how people live. I mean, I'll never forget walking into homes in Afghanistan and literally like their livestock live with them in their home because those livestock support their lives like that. They cannot afford for them to, run away or get injured or, have somebody steal them. Like, so they sleep with them in the living room with a little curtain between them. And this is livestock. And you think about that, and that's a huge perspective shift from people in America who, I want it and I want it now. And I don't want to have to do anything for it, and on and on and on.
Well, if we're getting philosophical, I think this is a great segue into our last section of the show, or I guess our second segment. So this is our Liberty questions that we kind of ask every guest. Yeah. So if you want, you can give like lightning round answers, like little sound bites, or if you want to go deep, go deep.
Okay.
So number 1, impacts. What is one of your top concerns that can or that does have an impact on your liberty or your lifestyle? This could be good or bad. It could be internal, external. So what could affect the temperature in your pool for you?
This has been a pretty deep conversation around my home right now. One of the things that is really starting to impact a lot of us is the social impacts that are going on right now. So you're looking at 2 generational shifts with you kind of have the baby boomers getting older. You have this younger generation coming in. And what you're realizing, this week alone, you've got some pretty big names in the TV industry being fired from sexual harassment. We have the national anthem protests in the NFL, on and on and on. We can bring up a lot of those different things. And, this is getting pretty heavy, but, one thing that I've seen is there's not a lot of balance, and balance is super important. Um, my wife and I have been spending a lot of time thinking about, like, are we racist? Like, really, are we racist? Because I think it's really easy for us to go, no, we're not racist. But, if I walk into certain rooms, do I feel comfortable? Do I not feel comfortable? Why? Um, so we're trying to be way more intentional in the way that we are viewing other people, and that we're viewing each other, and whether it's from a sex perspective, or whether it's from a race perspective, or a culture perspective. Um, and I think that the impact of an imbalance, the paradigm can shift, right? Like but it can swing so far the other way. Like you hear a lot of times when people are growing up, well, my dad was really hard on me, so they don't discipline their kids at all. And all that happened was it just shifted the other direction, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a balance there. There has to be a balance all the way across the board for everybody. Everybody has to take a hard look. I want to be careful in what I go into more, but with that. But I just want to say that the impact of the social temperature in our nation right now, the way that everybody reacts, the way that our leaders react, is going to make or break America in very, very big ways. I feel like sometimes our leaders are not nearly sensitive enough to how big of a deal, social acceptance from all parties really is, while also understanding full accountability, full grace. That's a big deal that we say in our home: full accountability, full grace, meaning that if you have a responsibility in life as an American, as a leader, as a diplomat, as a war fighter, as a father, as a husband, whatever it is, we need to be held to full accountability in the things that we are responsible for. At the same time, giving each other full grace in the fact that we're not perfect people. So there's a balance there. And I think that sometimes the scales, I almost see the scales shifting the other way, where, you have parties calling out other parties, and the pendulum is almost passing center and going to the other direction, if that makes sense. I'm trying to, be politically correct while also transparent in the fact that we just have to be careful. We have to, all parties have to understand, we all have to ask ourselves, am I being racist? Am I being sexist? Am I being, while also looking at each other's perspective. So I don't know if that's too vague, but.
No, that's perfect.
No, I like that. You said full accountability, full
grace.
Full grace. I like that.
Next one, question 2. This one's motivation. So when life is challenging, or what Ox likes to call character building days, what do you do to bring yourself either mental relaxation or insight or clarity? So how do you take those challenging days and push through them?
For me,
that would be a great question, I guess, for a SEAL, huh?
Yeah. For me, I'm a man of faith. So, that's my first go-to. I think my second go-to, honestly, is that in a weird way, I function better under stress. My family would tell you that I seek out stress. I try to make things stressful, unintentionally sometimes.
No.
We're all different. And for me, everybody has to do what works for them. For me, I love going outside. That's why the homesteading thing has been such a big deal, is if I have a really hard day, I take my dog outside and smoke a tobacco pipe and, work on the land. And it just allows me, when you look at homesteading, there's something really magical that happens in understanding the way that we are created. And this is my perspective, and I understand it's not everybody's perspective, but today you're talking to me, so you get to hear mine. But when you look at what we try and create with fertilizers and, all the different, pesticides and all this different stuff that we try and do. And if we just take a step back and look at the way that the earth was created and areas that thrive well and try and replicate what God did, like there's something just super awesome about that. When you look at, okay, so trees drop this and, water mixed with animal droppings and, that creates this. And, so then from that we can plant this. And so bees, this is a male tree and a female tree, and then bees, cross pollinate. And you start looking at all that and you just go, wow. It makes you feel small in a good way. Small in the fact that, man, I don't have to have all this figured out. I don't have to have all the answers, because this is so much bigger than me that it's okay. I can have a hard day and come home, walk outside, take in some fresh air, enjoy my family, and, enjoy time with my wife and hear their giggles and their laughs, and allow that to be, honestly, it's just my therapy. Because when you don't have to have it all figured out, it really allows you to be free from being the one that figured it all out. So
I love it. Tracking. That's a cool thing about these questions is, like I said, you can go as weird as you want on them, and we love it here.
Yeah, sorry, man.
That's great.
No.
We really do. We enjoy this part. We might even want to start our episodes with these, because it allows people to really kind of get philosophical, which I love. All right.
Yep.
Number 3, mantras. Oh, this is Ox's favorite one. Okay. So a mentor once told Ox, start every day happy. So what do you do to start your day with positivity? Or do you have, maybe it's not the beginning of your day, but do you have any kind of favorite mantras or quotes that you say? I think you already said a couple on the show so far that we really like.
Yeah, the SEAL teams say the only easy day was yesterday. And, I think it's a great perspective on life, because it allows you to go into tomorrow with a challenge, knowing, hey, it's time to wake up and do it all over again and love doing it. That when you watch guys like David Goggins, who's a guy like, my brother in the teams, but also a freak of nature, he's incredible. But when you look at guys like that and you just go, man, how do you push through? How do you do it? There's a certain part where, in the SEAL teams, we say, embrace the suck.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain point where you just go, you know what? Like, the hard stuff is what I'm starting to love. And I've gotten to that point in my life where, whether it's school, whether it's work, where I just, I'll get to the point in work where I'll literally, I just need a challenge. Like, I want to be challenged. I'm not fearful of challenges anymore. I have to be challenged. Otherwise, I will go somewhere else and do something else, because I need that challenge. So for me, when I wake up every day, the SEAL teams have a lot of different ones. But I think for me, it would probably be waking up, spending time in the Word, and understanding that I have a bigger mission in life outside of my own, selfish motives sometimes. But I have things that I want to do, but really I have a bigger calling. And in that, I want to embrace that. And I want to love life, and I want to love being able to be an American and be able to, own land. Like, just the fact that I'm able to even own land. I mean, I don't know. So I guess, I don't know if y'all have ever heard this story about, there was a professor, stop me if you've heard this 100 times, but there's a professor that was speaking to his class, and, today we're going to give you a lesson on life. And so he takes out this big glass jar. Have you guys ever heard this story?
Yeah, but go ahead.
But for the audience, let's run it.
So
he
takes out this big glass jar, and he puts, some big rocks in there, and he goes, all right, raise your hand if you think the jar is full. And, a couple people raise their hand, and he takes out a box from underneath his desk, a smaller box, and it has some pebbles, and he pours the pebbles into this, this big vase jar. All right, now the jar's full. Raise your hand if you think it's full. And, a few more people raise their hand this time, and he pulls out another box, and it's a box of sand, and he pours the sand in, and everybody just kind of shakes their head. Got it. He goes, all right, now it's full, right? And almost everybody raises their hand. And then he just takes a drink of his coffee and pours it on top. And then he said, here's the point. In life, you're going to have the big rocks, the rocks that, they're hard, they're deaths, they're job losses, they're wars, they're burns, they're scars. Then you're going to have the pebbles. You're going to have the things in life that you look back on, and some are good, some are bad, but ultimately, they just helped kind of shape you, And then there's the sand, and that's the stuff that when people ask you about, you don't even remember. You got all worked up and you yelled at somebody and screamed at somebody. But 5 years from now, when somebody says on January 4th, 2017, where were you? You're not even going to remember.
Right.
And, another student raises his hand, and he says, well, what's the coffee for? And he goes, it just goes to show that you always have time for a friend, for a cup of coffee with a friend. And my wife and I resort back to that a lot. And we resort back to, it's just sand. So I think that when you wake up in the morning, for me, I try and attack life versus allowing life to attack me. And I'm not perfect. I'm not one of these freak people that, I'm a procrastinator, and, I'm not always prepared for every single one of my meetings. And, it's just one of those things where there are things every day that I want to get better at. But I just want to get better every day. So as long as I'm getting better every day, as a father, as a husband, as a disciple, as a war fighter, even though I'm retired from, slinging the gun, I don't think we ever fully retire from that. Whether that's supporting our brothers that are currently doing it, or, fighting for things that help, keep our people, the United States safe, our family safe. But there's just as a business leader, as a boss, as a coworker, as all these things, as a son, I constantly, every day, I just want to get better.
Speaking of getting better, so question number 4 out of 5. So for the audience, this one's called Take Action. So what actions can you recommend for the audience, for people that can start improving their lives today or really soon in the future?
Be you and understand you. I think that's what I would say. Understand you. We as a culture have this tendency to just fall in line with those around us and with our bubbles and with our cultures. And, we just fall right in line with the person in front of us. Whether it's from, a religious perspective, whether it's from a, cultural perspective of work, and, well, my dad made this much, so that's all I'm going to make. Or, my dad didn't go to college, so I didn't go to college. Or my mom, my mom was abused, so, she abused me, and that made me do what I'm going to do. There are a lot of things in life that if we don't understand who we are and what we believe and are very intentional with those things, what's going to happen is at the end of the day, we're just going to be the product of everything around us, right? Instead of creating a product from who we are. And I think what's really important is to understand who we are. So for me, one of the biggest milestones in my life have been understanding, who I am as a man of faith, understanding who I am as a husband, understanding who I am as a father, really being intentional about learning and thinking and meditating and discussing with people around you, like different ways of parenting, different ways of being a father, different ways of, addressing each kid. What's the personality of this kid? What's the personality of this kid? And really being intentional at that time so that, we're not just watching those around us and reacting. Instead, we're being intentional and understanding every aspect of who we are as best that we can, constantly growing in that, so that ultimately when somebody says, Ox, what would you do in this situation and why? You can say, well, if I was President Trump, I believe I would do this because of this and this and this and this and the way that I believe. So I think understanding you is a big place to start. People run from themselves instead of embracing themselves and trying to get better. A lot of times we don't like what we see, so we run and we try and avoid making ourselves better at all costs. And we want other people to speak into us and positively and shape us. We don't want people to address our bad, and we don't like confrontation. That's one thing I've noticed in the workplace. In the SEAL teams, it's all about conflict, right? Like if you're working out, you're like, I work out better than you do. You know what I mean? Everybody is about conflict in every way, shape, and form. And because that's what it is. Like that whole community is a big community of conflict. We thrive in conflict. We look for conflict. We create conflict. So with that being said, when you look at people in the workforce, people run from conflict. They absolutely hate it. And it's because they're not confident in themselves and in who they are and in what they believe. Because when you're confident in those things, it's okay to say, I messed up, or I don't know, or, when you're confident in those things, then it frees you up from a lot of that. And for me, I'm a man of faith. So obviously when I have faith in something greater than myself, that frees me from a lot of burden. But understand you.
Awesome. Last one. This one's cool. Recommended reading. So whether it's a book or it's a YouTube channel or a YouTube video or a podcast channel, what can you recommend for people in the audience, either concerning homesteading or liberty or the SEAL teams or kind of anything off the wall? Anything recommended?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I would really recommend Liberty Mastermind podcast.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And I've really enjoyed Justin Rhodes on the homesteading side. I don't know if you guys have been following him or not, but him and his family bought a bus. They had a homestead and bought a bus, left the homestead and traveled all 50 states this year. I think it took them 9 months. And man, they just saw so much. I mean, I love digging into, the stuff that the media that they're putting out, because, they did a really good job. A lot of times when you watch somebody, like when I watch Salads, like I know, he gets into finances and stuff a little bit, but he does a lot on chickens, obviously, right? But what Justin Rhodes just did was he just exposed an entire genre of people that I think a lot of homesteaders were like, wow, I didn't know there were that many people that, cared that much or are struggling with the same things that I am, or started small and got big. Or so, man, like if you watch that, I mean, he hit a lot of places. And I know obviously I don't want to take up too much time, but I mean, everything from there was one guy that he wanted to just create a compost business. So he started going around collecting food, throwing some mulch and, tree limbs and different things into these compost piles that turned into a compost business. And now he has 600 chickens that turn and scratch these compost piles every day. I mean, these things are operating at super high temperatures because every day they're being scratched at, they're being turned, and they're getting nitrogen dumped on them every day. And he never feeds the chickens. So the chickens live off of this compost and all the organisms that are growing in the compost, and he never has to feed them, and he goes and sells 600 eggs a day. So like, well played, man. Like well
That's
done.
awesome.
So
That's what I said magical earlier. And this could be like 2 hours of a show. That's what I think is so magical about homesteading, is finding, something that might be an output or waste,
yeah,
and you
and
can,
turning it into a complete,
yeah. Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's
I could go on for a long time, but we won't.
yeah, no, that's great, man. So check out Justin Rhodes, and I mean they're doing awesome things, and I can tell he doesn't speak too much on it, but I can tell that they're very intentional in the way that they're raising their family and so on and stuff like that. So I've taken a lot away from him. John Siskovich has been another good one. The thing that I really like about John Siskovich is that he takes a very good business approach to the way that he's doing homesteading. They actually produce their own beer now and grow hops and everything. But I mean, I'll never forget when I was first starting off with chickens and looking at broilers and chicken tractors and everything. I mean, the guy breaks down he had it broken down into like, how much electricity did I use for my chicks in the first 3 months, and you're like, dang, bro, like he took that to a whole new level, man. Like, well done. But he's doing an awesome job, man. They got a beautiful farm up there. So those two guys have been really impactful to me, and they have a really positive outlook on life, and they just enjoy it. They genuinely love what they are doing, and it just shows. So I love that. There's a lot of other ones out there. Those are two good ones to start with if you're just starting out on the homesteading front. I love Goggins. From a SEAL perspective, the thing that the dude just freaking keeps it real.
He's like he does like ultra marathons and
Yeah.
all that running, and yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, like, I saw on Instagram yesterday, and he's like, yeah, somebody was going to run with me today, and the storm was coming, and the guy said, well, why don't we do it tomorrow? And he was like, well, I'll run tomorrow with you too, but I'm going to run today. He's just, it's you got to have people like that around you where you can just I love looking at his stuff because he's a brother in the SEAL teams, and he still motivates me. You know what I mean? It's like he's just a good dude, so I appreciate him. In regards to readings, there's some really good stuff out there from a business perspective, from a faith perspective. The Word, obviously, you can't beat it. From a faith perspective, I love guys like John Piper, Matt Chandler, Tim Keller, those guys that make huge impacts on my life. But from a work perspective, I think it's really important. One of the greatest things that I think that one of the greatest pieces of advice that I was given in getting out of the military was to build a life board. And I've taken that very seriously. So that kind of goes outside of media, but it's something that has been invaluable to me, is that I have people in my life board, like you'd have a board for a company. I have a life board of guys that I have built around me intentionally in order to help me in different ways. So I have, one guy, it's an old cowboy and rancher that, helps me on the homesteading front. He's, a few steps ahead of me, and he just has been awesome and embraced me in that way. Guys from a spiritual perspective that, I walk life with, and, I've got people in the construction industry or finance industry that, walk with me and give me good sound advice. So I think it's very important to be intentional. That's what I would say, is that if you're going to consume media, be intentional about it. Don't just check out. You can relax and still move forward.
So listening to your answers has been like a really good sermon where you just got to kind of go back and I mean that with love in my heart. It's like you just got to go back and kind of meditate on the answers. The floor is yours, brother. anything you want to talk about, cover, plug? I know.
Yeah,
It's been really fun.
man, I've really enjoyed this. The thing that I would say is, um, man, thank you to you guys, honestly, because it's really important that that people are really thinking about some of the items that you guys are bringing to the surface. And I think that my kind of plug, so to speak, would be for people to take what they hear. And I'm not saying you always have to agree with it, but think on it, and if you're talking about homesteading, or if you're talking about, protection, or you're talking about freedom, or you're talking about whatever you're talking about in your podcast, that, man, my recommendation would be for people to stop and actually really meditate on the things that are being said, and to think about, you know, Ox, I'm talking about, use some integrated reasoning, right? And to really stop and practice some of the things that they've learned, but also to think about, like, well, do I agree with that, or do I disagree with that? And should I try that, or should I not? Or to take risk, take some risk, step out there, do some things that, start with a tomato plant, and and start somewhere, do something to move your life forward. And I just think it's awesome to have media being produced that's useful, that actually contributes to the betterment of humanity, instead of just a vacuum of wasting our middle mind space and time, and sucking us of energy. One of the biggest things that I've found is that when you dig into media that produces life, it gives you life and energy. So I find myself in the morning, digging into different types of media that bring life to me, and it gives me energy, instead of watching TV that drains me. So, and thank you guys very much for contributing to making humanity better, and, producing better food, and contributing to the next generation and their work ethic. And thank you for, talking about the things that you do. So, man, I'm just grateful to be on today.
Well, likewise. And I think I speak for all the guys. I think it'll be really fun to, follow up with you 6 months, or, something down the road, and just kind of see what the latest is with the homestead, and, hear what the latest and greatest is with the Fuller homestead.
Yeah, it'd be great, man. Appreciate you.
Jake, I wish I had more to say on the homesteading stuff in the beginning, but I'm stuck here on a little HOA with a tiny little grass-only backyard.
No, you're good.
Not loving that, but it was really cool to sit and listen, and I can definitely see you coming back on again. This was really enjoyable.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So this is the end of episode 22, folks, and we want to thank our special guest, Jake Fuller, for hanging out with us. Thanks for listening, and we hope we brought you some value. If we have, then subscribe on our website at libertymastermindpodcast.com. Same name on YouTube. And for Twitter, we are at the Liberty3. We're on iTunes, Google Play, and all those other podcast places. So until next time, be alert, stay safe, and seek out liberty in everything you do.